Welcome to the podcast series titled Global Resilience for National Cybersecurity, Strengthening the Interconnections Among Actors. This is Greta Nasi, co-director of the Master of Science in Cyber Risk Strategy and Governance, jointly offered by Bocconi University and Polytechnic of Milan. Together with Professor MacArthur, adjunct professor at Bocconi, we discuss with our guests key topics on the role of government and cybersecurity. This project was made possible thanks to a grant from the U.S. mission to Italy, and it holds the patronage of the Italian Parliamentary Anti-Mafia Commission. This podcast is titled Society, Cyber Awareness and Competences. The need for a cybersecurity workforce capable of handling tasks represent a strategic issue for all countries. Building, upgrading knowledge, skills, and capacity in cybersecurity has led several governments to establish policy initiatives and cybersecurity competence centers at national and supranational level. To ensure convergence and dialogue within the layers of a hierarchy in one organization, but also to foster the sharing of information among public and private institutions, professionals of cybersecurity should be able to master complementary set of skills, ranging from technical expertise to understanding, assessing, and governing the opportunities and threats of the existing and emerging technologies used in the society we live in, combined with regulatory, analytics, and managerial capacity, as well as soft skills that range from negotiation skills to communication and public speaking competencies. This podcast aims to advance the critical elements of cyber awareness culture and cyber competencies required to advance the capacity in cybersecurity of all states. I would like to thank our guests, Paolo Atzeni from the Italian National Cybersecurity Agency, Javier Gomez Prieto from ENISA, the European Cybersecurity Agency, Richard Harknett, co-director of the Ohio Cyber Range Institute, Francesca Lazzaroni from Spike Reply, Alberto Longhi from the Leonardo Cyber Academy, and Karen Wetzel from the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education, Nasi. Colin, over to you.
Paolo Atzeni is the Director for Skill and Competence Development at the Italian National Cybersecurity Agency. Dr. Atzeni, can you tell us, in setting up the Italian cybersecurity strategy, what are the key principles related to skills and competencies that you've had in mind? Are there sort of examples, or what kind of impact are you aiming to make?
You asked me about the strategy and what we are doing. Just a few words on the agency. I do represent the Italian National Agency for Cybersecurity, which is an institution which was created 1.5 years ago. We already have 200 people, so we are really growing, and we aim at being 300 by the end of the year and 500 or 700 in 5 or 6 years from now, because there is really need for people with different specialties, all those I mentioned earlier. And what is the goal? The goal is to coordinate the various public entities involved in cybersecurity. What does this sentence mean? That cybersecurity is relevant for law enforcing agency, I mean the police, is relevant for the armed forces, is relevant for the intelligence, and there are specific bodies in our countries that are responsible for cybersecurity in the specific area. But then cybersecurity, as we have just heard, is relevant for everybody. And then the goal of the agency is to coordinate every subject involved with this. Agency is to contribute to the development of skill and competencies in cybersecurity, and this is indeed my specific role within the agency. So I'm trying to promote. How do we proceed? We heard from the previous speakers, and we'll hear more, that there is a significant shortage gap, both in terms of quantity and quality in the labor force currently. So there is need to educate a lot of people in cybersecurity. What does it mean, educate? Educate, as I said before, in all directions and at all levels. What does it mean at all directions? You need technical staff, you need semi-technical staff, you need to train users. Users are individuals who have to avoid getting infected by ransomware or viruses or whatever, but you also have managers and top managers who coordinate activities which need to be protected from accidents and so forth. And each of these individuals in their own position have to be able to do what is really needed to do. How do support this? Well, you need education and training at all levels. What does it mean at all levels? School, high school, university, intermediate level at university, PhD, and so forth. And this has to be done both in technical areas as well as in non-technical ones. To go back to our previous example, I hope that now or in the near future, all law students do study something about technology, not necessarily on technology, but on how to talk to people who develop technology or who deploy technology. And I say law students, but medical students, economic students, I mean, all of them need to interact with the technology because the technology is everywhere now. And therefore, each of us who has responsibilities has to be able to deal with this.
Javier Gomez Prieto is from the European Agency for Cybersecurity. Javier, can you tell us, how is the EU shaping the cyber culture of Europe, and what are the key areas of focus? What should be included in all curriculum about cybersecurity, and what impacts are you aiming to make?
So this year is a very important year for the European Union in terms of cybersecurity skills promotion. From the European Commission, there is a specific priority this year called the Cyber Skills Academy. This is a very big initiative through which we from ENISA, the European Agency for Cybersecurity, we are contributing to. There are a lot of aspects to be addressed there. For example, I will mention 3 of them that are key pillars for this initiative at EU level. One is to give, let's say, more relevance to the policy side, to consider skills promotion from a comprehensive policy point of view. That is, for example, to reflect on funding instruments, to reflect on what kind of policy instruments could we improve for the promotion of skills, how to engage more actively partners in EU and member states. A second element could be that of including elements related to measuring the impact of skills promotion across EU. And finally, to promote a strong collaboration, active collaboration and coordination mechanisms to avoid duplication, to, let's say, be more coherent with what we are doing together. So this is basically what is being promoted from the EU. Now then, from ENISA, specifically what we are doing is along the lines of the cybersecurity skills framework. This is a framework that includes identification of 12 profiles. For example, CISO profiles or penetration tester, audit, education. All these profiles are included in this framework. It's been a collaborative work after 2 years of collaboration with many partners. And the idea now is to assess the impact of this framework, specifically when it comes to the adoption in member states. So we are working on that. And we also have the CyberHead. That is a registry of universities. That is a registry that allows people to understand what is happening in terms of education promotion in different member states. So we have more than 100 entries in this registry. Bocconi University is one of those. And that is key information for people at the time of knowing and understanding what is the academic offer in terms of cybersecurity and skills. So that is pretty much an overview of what we are doing. We expect to keep collaboration ahead with many partners across the EU. We need to understand what is happening specifically in member states in terms of a specific context and how, for example, industry-university collaboration can enhance the promotion of skills. And yeah, there is a lot of things to do, especially this year. I repeat that this very specific interest in the high political agenda with this Cyber Skills Academy.
Richard Harknett is a professor and director of the School of Public and International Affairs at the University of Cincinnati in Ohio in the United States. He's also the co-director of the Ohio Cyber Range Institute. Richard, given the trends in cybersecurity, can you say more about what the needs are for cyber awareness and competencies? What are the trends in education? What should cyber educators be focusing on?
Well, thanks, Colin. That issue of competencies, right, actually takes us to some sort of fundamentals when we think about cybersecurity. So when I think about cybersecurity at a fundamental level, it's not really a technical problem. It's a political, social, behavioral, organizational challenge in a technically fluid environment. So what does that mean when we relate that to competencies? Is that we have to have some degree of understanding of this technical space, right, if we're going to understand its fluidity. But we have to come at this, right, from that space of challenge. So we have to understand how this is transforming the way we organize. So there's a difference with network operations, not just in the technical space, but what do we talk about when we use the term networking, right? It's a different form of organization. That's leading to different forms of behavior, right? That's bringing challenges in the political and economic spheres as well. So as an educator, when I'm putting on my academic hat, right, I try to think through, well, how do I prepare that next generation of student for the workforce that they're going to be going into? Well, if I accept technical fluidity, then that education has to be tailored. That has to be tied to, right, that technical fluidity. There has to be, in fact, a feedback loop, right? And this requires ultimately for us not to think about education separate from workforce development or economic development. And that gets back to another fundamental about cyberspace, which is that it's an interconnected space. So when I approach the security side of this, I argue that we actually have to accept the challenge of interconnectedness. And what that main challenge means is that we can't find solutions through segmentation. The logic of interconnectedness means you're interconnected. You're in constant contact with everybody. So if that's true and if that holds, then the solution isn't to segment education over here, workforce development in the middle, and economic development down the road. How do you manifest that? It's through tighter coordination, cooperation between industry, private sector, government, and the academy, right? This has to start really early because, again, it's not a technical problem, right? It's a technical environment in which we have to bring a different mindset. And so that mindset needs to be started at the earliest stages of education, right? We have to understand that this interconnected world asks us to think about each other in this constant contact.
Francesca Lazzaroni is from Spike Reply. Francesca, from a consulting firm's perspective, what competencies need to be added the most, and in what industries? How do you deal with gaps in skills?
Prior to going in details on a specific market, I would like to highlight the difference between large enterprises and small enterprises, because of course it's important from our point of view, but also from the competencies that is required within this kind of business. So if I think of large enterprises, they usually have some security teams with a different number of people working specifically on security. While on small enterprises, you might have just one person or half-time person, and of course the budget is different as well. So the kind of competencies and the approach you have to use in dealing with security is slightly different. In large enterprises, in my opinion, you can focus on, I don't know, let's start speaking of CISO, okay? In this kind of role, you need the technical background, even if you are not such an expert, but you have to understand which are the main criticalities and priorities you have to address. But also you have to be someone reporting to top management and being able to speak with all other stakeholders and sort of promoting security awareness and culture, as the colleagues was saying earlier, in the whole organization. So it's not only, let's say, a focus on technical stuff, but you need also competencies in dealing with others. And I kind of see this on the market actually right now. So probably the path that is going on, and I've seen a lot of training material, even from universities and courses. So I think this is going in the right direction, in my opinion. While if we focus on the rest of the team, of the security team in larger enterprises, you can notice a sort of deepening down in specific security domains. So it's a sort of verticalization of competencies instead of the more cross security that we were used to. So right now, if you think of security domain, I don't know, network security or identity management or data protection and encryption, you have an expert in each of these areas. And this goes both from technical point of view and from the governance point of view. So it's not anymore about policies, but I would say more about process. So if you have a good technology, but bad process, kind of is not working, and vice versa as well. So in this kind of context, what I see that I think is still missing, and is missing, in my opinion, also in the university and the other kind of training that I see currently, is, for example, if we focus on plants environment and energy and utilities, the OT security part. Those kind of competencies that goes in details on the OT part, PLC, SCADA, and on the same time can apply security in these kind of activities, is something that is right there, but not yet ready, in my opinion. And if we want to focus on other kind of industries, for example, the financial sector, banks, insurances, recently they moved a lot towards cloud, and you can see and listen to everywhere about cloud. What about cloud security expert? This is not only about competencies, but in my opinion, I would say a little more about approach and method. We have to learn how to adopt new methods to provide security, and do not use the same, I don't know, checklist approach or the usual approach in every kind of different technology. So we have to evolve and start of think of propension for innovation. That's something that I think is not a competence, but is kind of missing. In small enterprises, instead, the kind of competence is slightly different, because usually it's one-man show about security. You don't have much budget, so it's more about, let's say, persuading others that security is important. And so we are going back to a sort of CISO kind of figure.
Alberto Longhi is from the Leonardo Cyber Academy. Dr. Longhi, if we take the perspective of a critical infrastructure operator, are there peculiarities in skills and competencies to govern your activities? What should critical infrastructure operators be really focusing on in training and development?
We are seeing a tremendous rise in the number of incidents affecting critical infrastructures, and that's because that is a very attractive target for cyber attacks, also state-sponsored attacks. And that's one of the reasons why many countries now have laws and regulations requiring a certain level of cybersecurity of all those operators of essential services. The question is, how are they prepared? What is the level of their skills and competencies toward this type of compliance. And I think the situation differs from the type of operators, because some, like telcos or banks, have been using computer systems for a long time now. So cybersecurity is quite already in their organization culture. But most of the others have been operating on a physical level until very recently. And think of water supply, transportation, energy. And so they don't have such an organizational culture oriented to the technical and to the information computer systems. So that's a big gap to cover. And at all levels, at the management level, the technical staff level, and the user base, of course. And just to talk about the technical skills, the technical staff, apart from the fact that we know that there is a big shortage of cybersecurity experts now, if we think of peculiarities of the operators that work on the physical level, we have a whole new area that has to be upskilled, and that's the security of cyber-physical systems. For that, I believe we really need a new type of professional, the new type of profile, and that's an engineer who is really expert, both in cybersecurity and in physical security. And that's one reason why we at the Leonardo Academy are developing this strategic learning path just towards that. And we have a cyber range platform that is designed to virtualize IT, OT systems, just to train this new type of engineer of the future.
Karen Wetzel is the manager of the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education framework at the U.S. National Institute of Standards and Technology. Karen, what elements did you consider in setting up the Certification and Competencies framework from NIST? What are the challenges in implementing it, and what impact do you aim to make?
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm manager of the NICE framework in the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education, which is in the National Institutes for Standards and Technology, or NIST, under the Department of Commerce. So the way we've approached this, and I'm so glad to have followed all of these other speakers, because everything that they're saying is what we have been experiencing and what we've been trying to address in some small way with the NICE framework. The NICE framework is a framework that helps to define cybersecurity work. It does so through various elements that we have put out as a common language so that we can engage with all of the different stakeholders in this environment. So that includes speaking at the K-12 levels, as we're starting to look and bring cybersecurity to the youth, as well as start to introduce cybersecurity careers at those early levels. It takes place in education, and that's both in the traditional classroom environments in 2- and 4-year colleges, but also in with certification providers, with training and other kinds of areas. And it also takes place, of course, with employers in a variety of different levels, with, of course, learners being at the core. And we use the word learners to really mean all of those people who are engaging, from students to people who are looking for jobs, as well as people who are in the current in positions currently. And the way we approached this was by defining a common language built off of building blocks of task, knowledge, and skill statements. Our task statements define work that is to be done. It makes certain that what we're talking about is put in that workplace perspective. It's not an academic only kind of approach. It's really that hands-on. What will someone in this position, this work role, be doing? It also defines the skills and the knowledge that someone might need to possess to be able to, what they need to know and what they need to be able to do in order to complete those skills. And then it defines those via work roles as well as via competency areas. And the work roles there are 52 work roles. They're not the same as jobs. They're really meant to be flexible because, as we've been hearing, one of our work roles is legal advisor. we're not going to necessarily presume that someone is going to only be a cybersecurity legal advisor and that's all they'll do. But there are going to be many people who that is an aspect of their work. And so they need to possess that work role as part of their job. And that's the same for all the technical ones as well. As we heard from Francesca, that some organizations may be very large and with a very well developed team to be able to tackle our cybersecurity issues. Others may be smaller organizations where someone may need to have be able to touch on a number of different kinds of work roles. And so our approach allows for that flexibility, whether it's a small or a large organization, regardless of sector. We work with both the public, with federal, local, state, tribal governments, as well as with private industry. So we work with a variety of different kinds of employers in order to use these components to understand how work roles can be used in developing job descriptions, in hiring, in education, as we are trying to bring people into these positions. And then, of course, with our newly introduced competency areas as well, which serve as an additional level of approach to being able to apply these task, knowledge, and skill statements in newer areas that maybe don't have well-defined work roles yet. And then, when it comes to challenges, I think we've heard a number of different challenges here. And I'd really like to almost go back to what Richard started off with that idea of being interconnected. In our mission statement, we talk about this as a integrated ecosystem, that everything that we do needs to be done as a whole, that if education is doing one thing and employers are expecting something else, there's a disconnect and a break. We need to be working together in order to really address these issues. And so that's one of the big challenges. It's how do we make certain that what we are doing and our, from my perspective, having the NICE framework as a foundation for this language is consistent throughout. It's meant to be flexible. It's not a hard and fast. It's flexible. It needs to be agile and responsive to this changing environment. And those are challenges, but those are also things that we're building into the framework. And so it is about understanding how do we integrate it throughout all of our systems? How do we develop some of the processes that are needed? And so those are challenges, but there are challenges that can be addressed. Some of the other ones that might be and that have already been touched on include around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So what we're looking at is an approach that allows for employers and for those learners to really evidence their capabilities, to demonstrate their capabilities in different ways, both through traditional entry points, such as through degrees, but also for those who may be coming from different kinds of areas, different career paths. And that might be, straight out of school. It might be at mid-career. It may be a shift in needing an upskilling or reskilling in order to move into this environment. And so those are challenges, but also opportunities that will then help us with, coming back to your last question around some of the things that we are hoping to do and impact. And really, I think that impact needs to take place at all levels. As we heard from Paolo with the Italian strategy, we here in the United States are also developing a national strategy through our office of our National Cyber Director. And that strategy is looking at both broadly speaking cybersecurity, but also having a separate unique strategy around cybersecurity workforce. And we're working with that because we want to make sure that that impact is broad, that it takes place at all levels, that we are understanding that cybersecurity is not something that's in one portion of an organization, but is across an organization. It is interdisciplinary, and that most of anybody in today's environment, in today's world, is dealing with technology and has some responsibility in this space. That may change. You might have one person whose job is cybersecurity and someone who doesn't necessarily even think of themselves as cybersecurity at all. And that's something that we want to be able to adjust, is recognize that they too have a role in making certain that their systems are secure.
So in conclusion, I think we've heard how obviously important it is to increase the number of people who can work on cyberspace and related issues in a number of different ways. Obviously, these problems are not going away, and we need to equip our next generation of experts starting now. But I think we've also heard a number of different national perspectives on how to do this. And the good news is that there is increasing harmonization between these strategies and approaches. So in what ways do we see these strategies becoming aligned or harmonized? I think, first of all, we see an acknowledgement that cyber challenges are multidisciplinary. We are not just talking about training the next generation of IT people or technical experts. We're talking about the need for competencies in cyber diplomacy, in understanding how interconnected systems affect physical systems, affect essential services. We're talking about how we have to start managing and educating a broader society and sort of working with their psychology and sociology. So cyber education is becoming necessarily multidisciplinary. So that's point number one. Point number two is that as it becomes multidisciplinary, it also needs to involve not just the government and experts, but all of society. I think we hear from Europe and from the United States an acknowledgement that all of society plays a role in securing cyberspace. And as a result, all of society needs to be part of competence building. We can't just create competencies within our governments. We have to think about private industry, about small and medium enterprises, even about individuals, even about everyday people. And so then the third point comes to whether and when we do this. In the past, we really thought of ourselves as preparing for a cyber attack and defending a cyber attack. But as Richard Harknett points out, we are actually engaged in a constant interaction with our cyber partners and perhaps adversaries. We can't assume that there will be one attack that we defend ourselves from. We have to assume instead that we are constantly engaged. And as a result, we have to prepare our people for this constant active engagement in cyberspace. We have to be persistently there, and we have to build our whole set of competencies and cyber education around that. So again, many different perspectives from different nations and viewpoints, but overall, I think we see that with different words and slightly different tunes, everybody is moving towards these key themes of multidisciplinary competencies that apply to all of society and enable us to engage actively and constantly instead of just preparing and defending against singular attacks.
Thank you to our guests, and thank you to the audience for listening to this podcast.